Power frameworks are the most difficult aspect of character creation in Champions now, but they enable the creation of really interesting characters, so they're really worth working with. There are three different kinds of power frameworks: the element control, the multiform, and the variable power pool. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to take each one of those in turn. I'm going to give you the rules that govern the individual framework. I'm going to present an example that we're going to work with, and then I'm going to dive into the hero calculator to show you how it's done. So let's begin with elemental controls. So an elemental control is like a broad power concept under which are discrete expressions of that power. So, for example, you might have the element control flame projection, and under that flame projection, you would have fire flight or fire bolt or fire shield as discrete expressions of that broader concept. An elemental control has a control, which is that broader power concept with slots underneath the element control. And the slots have a minimum value, but there are no maximum values associated with that. And in the end, the control is going to provide a point break or a point reduction for the slots that are in the element control. Here's how you build one. First, we begin with the slots. Now, I will place, you'll see that when I go into the hero calculator, I will create a placeholder for the control itself, but I'm not going to allocate any points to it. Instead, I'm going to start building the individual slots, which include powers for the element control. Now, remember, these individual slots contain a single power, but a single power can be built using more than one component. And furthermore, those slots can also have advantages attached to them. Now, limitations can be in the mix too, but limitations are not done at this point in the building process. They will come later in the process, right? Now, there are a few rules governing what powers can go in an element control. First, all components that go into a control must use endurance or must draw on the endurance that is spent when using strength. Right. The second thing is that the lowest point power in control must be divisible by 10. Right. So once you're done building all of the slots and having them conform to these rules or these requirements, then you're ready for the next step, which is to figure out the cost or the point allocation that you will make to the control itself, right? And the way that you figure out that allocation is by going to the lowest point slot that you created and taking half of that value and entering that as a control. So if your lowest point slot is 10 points, you're going to allocate 5 points to the control. Once you've figured out what the points and the control are, then you're ready for the next step, which is the point reduction, right? So at this point, you're going to deduct the control from each of the slots that are in the element control. And then, and only then, can you go to the final step, which is to apply limitations to the slots that have been reduced by the control cost. So that limitation applies to the reduced value. And that's it. It seems like a lot, but as we'll see in a moment, the hero calculator will streamline all of this so that it's easy to keep track of. Before we dive into the hero calculator, though, let me present the power that we're going to work with as an example. In this case, the elemental control is going to be Psychic Flame. That's the broad power concept, and it's one that a villain in one of the campaigns that I'm running at this moment has. She can tap into this extra planar energy that manifests as a flame, and she can kind of fuse with it, and she can also channel it to do various mental effects, right? We're going to build two of the powers that are in this element control. One of those is going to be Flame Wraith, which allows her to become intangible when she merges with that extraplanar flame. And the other is going to be a mental power called Revealing Flames. And the Revealing Flames is a telepathic probe that not only reads minds, but also causes harm to the people whose minds are being read, right? So that first slot, the Flame Wraith power, is going to be built with one component, and that's going to be D solid. And the second slot is going to be built with two components, one of those being telepathy and the other one being blast, right? Furthermore, that blast is going to have a couple of advantages. One of those is ego based, so that she can tag her enemies mentally rather than physically. And the second is going to be the severe brutal advantage because the blast component of this power is going to be penetrating defenses more often than not. And then finally, we have to add the limitation exhausting. And you'll see that I have to apply that to the whole bundle rather. This is the elemental control that I'll be building. Let's go to the hero calculator and build it. All right. So the first thing we have to do is um, enter a placeholder for the elemental control. So we're going to call this psychic flame. Okay. And I'm going to bold that in the same way that I would bold a power. And then we're going to call it elemental control. And I'm going to treat the elemental control as if it were, a component. So I'm not bolding it. But we're not making any point allocations to this yet. This is just a placeholder. Instead, I'm going to start building slots. And so I'm going to do that underneath the psychic flame and I'll number it just like that. So we're going to say flame wraith. Okay, and that's the power. And we're going to have the component be solid. And we're going to give her 4 levels of, of the solid for the flame wraith. So let me bold the power. And I know from looking at the book that the solid is 10 points per level, so we'll enter 40 active points there. There are no advantages associated with this power, so no advantage value. The heightened points are 40, which again, they're not heightened at all. They're just the same as active points. But remember, we have to confirm points here in total heightened points. Once I do that, they express across the table here, and you'll see that the total points are 40. Things get more interesting when we build the second component because it has, or the second slot, because it has two components, right? So we're going to say revealing flames, and then we're going to build the power or add the components beneath that because we have two to worry about. So let's see, this is going to be telepathy, and we're going to make this 66. That's going to be 30 active points. And no advantage, no advantage value. So you see the heightened points are just the active points at 30. But here we're going to pause and we're not going to confirm the value here like we have been doing for all the other powers. And this is the reason we have this column because when we're working with elemental controls, we need those points bundled and reduced before we apply limitations. And the other page, we could be a little bit sloppy and we could kind of keep them separate because um, we don't have that issue. But when we're working with elemental controls, and by the way, when we're working with multiforms as well, we need to have those points bundled and reduced before we apply the limitation. So we're just not going to do that yet. Instead, I'm going to build the second component. So blast. It's only going to be a 1d6 blast. Okay, that's only a 5 active point power. However, here we have the advantages ego based, which is going to be a 0.5, plus severe stunning because it bypasses defenses. That's another 0.5. And so it's a 0.5 and a 0.5. That's a total advantage value of 1, which of course doubles our active points and turns them into 10 heightened points. So here we have 10 heightened points. Now we're going to confirm both of those slots together, right? So 30 plus 10, and we're going to confirm them into one bundle here, is 40. So this is a 40-point component or a 40-point power, two components that come together to create a 40-point revealing flames power. After confirming them together here, you see that they express over here under the pre-limitation points, and they express across the sheet all the way over to the total points. So there you go. We've built both slots. And in this case, both slots are 40 points. So the lowest point slot is 40. We take half of that value, and now we are ready to allocate the points to the actual elemental control. So 20 points is going to be the point allocation. We need to confirm it. Okay, so that runs all the way across. So now we have a 20-point elemental control with two 40-point slots. The next step is to reduce the slots by the value of the elemental control. And this is the other thing that I think is a little clunky or cumbersome about the hero calculator. It's not a huge deal, but I wish there was a way of doing it a little more smoothly. The only way that I can think of doing that right now is to actually go in and modify the formula for each of the slots. So to do that, we just double click on the cell. Okay, it opens it up and gives you the formula, and you just do minus 20. Enter. Pretty simple. And then you do it over here, minus 20. Enter. And so now we have reduced both slots by 20 points. So they're both 20-point slots. The last thing we have to do is apply the limitation, exhausting, to that second slot. Exhausting is a 1-point limitation. We will enter the 1 under the limitations value, and it has reduced the 20 points down to 10. So the whole elemental control so far is a total of 50 points. All right? And that's it, right? These things can be pretty complex, but again, the hero calculator structures it for you so that it's not that easy to make mistakes. Okay, so element controls being out of the way, let's jump over to multiforms.